Welcome to Trench Diaries. This is Stuka Pilot, Part 15. Chapter 17. The Death Struggle of the Last Months. Early on the morning of February the 9th, a telephone call arrives from HQ. Frankfurt has just reported that last night the Russians breached the order at Lebus, slightly north of Frankfurt, and, with some tanks, have already gained a footing on the west bank. The situation is more than critical. At this point there is no opposition on the ground and there is no possibility of bringing up heavy artillery there in time to stop them. So there is nothing to prevent the Soviet tanks from rolling on towards the capital, or at least straddling the railway and the autobahn from Frankfurt to Berlin, both vital supply lines for the establishment of the order front. We fly there to find out what truth there is to this report. From afar I can already make out the pontoon bridge. We encounter intense flag a long way before we reach it. The Russians certainly have a rod in pickle for us. One of my squadrons attacks the bridge built across the ice. We have no great illusions about the results we shall achieve, knowing as we do that Ivan has such quantities of bridge building material that he can repair the damage in less than no time. I myself fly lower with the anti-tank flight on the lookout for tanks on the west bank of the river. I can discern their tracks, but not the monsters themselves. Or are these the tracks of AA tractors? I come down lower to make sure and see, well camouflaged in the folds of the river valley, some tanks on the northern edge of the village of Lebus. There are perhaps a dozen or 15 of them. Then something smacks against my wing, a hit by light flak. I keep low, guns are flashing all over the place. At a guess 6 or 8 batteries are protecting the river crossing. The flag gunners appear to be old hands at the game with long Stuka experience behind them. They are not using tracers. One sees no string of beads snaking up at one, but one only realizes that they have opened up when the aircraft shudders harshly under the impact of a hit. They stop firing as soon as we climb, and so our bombers cannot attack them. Only when one is flying very low above our objective can one see the spurt of flame from the muzzle of a gun like the flash of a pocket torch. I consider what to do. There is no chance of coming in cunningly behind cover, as the flat river valley offers no opportunities for such tactics. There are no tall trees or buildings. Sober reflection tells me that the experience and tactical skill go by the board if one breaks all the fundamental rules derived from them. The answer? A stubborn attack and trust to luck. If I had always been so foolhardy, I should have been in my grave a dozen times. There are no troops here on the ground, and we are 50 miles from the capital of the Reich, a perilously short distance when the enemy's armor is already pushing towards it. This is no time for ripe consideration. This time you will have to trust to luck, I tell myself, and in I go. I tell the other pilots to stay up. There are several new crews among them, and while they cannot be expected to do much damage with this defense, we are likely to suffer heavier losses than are worth the candle. When I come in low, and as soon as they see the flash of the AA guns, they are to concentrate their cannon fire on the flag. There is always the chance that this will get Ivan rattled and affect his accuracy. There are several Stalin tanks there, the rest are T-34s. After 4 have been set on fire and I have run out of ammunition, we fly back. I report my observations and stress the fact that I have only attacked because we are fighting 50 miles from Berlin, otherwise it would be inexcusable. If we were holding a line further east, I should have waited for a more favorable situation, or at least until the tanks had driven out of range of their flag screen round the bridge. I change aircraft after 2 sorties because they have been hit by flak. Back a 4th time and a total of 12 tanks are ablaze. I am buzzing a Stalin tank which is emitting smoke but refuses to catch fire. Each time before coming into the attack, I climb to 2,400 feet as the flak cannot follow me to this altitude. From 2,400 feet I scream down in a steep dive, weaving violently. When I am close to the tank, I straighten up for an instant to fire and then streak away low above the tank with the same evasive tactics until I reach a point where I can begin to climb again, out of range of the flag. I really ought to come in slowly and with my aircraft better controlled, but this would be suicide. I am only able to straighten up for the fraction of a second and hit the tank accurately in its vulnerable parts thanks to my manifold experience and somnambulistic assurance. Such attacks are, of course, out of the question for my colleagues for the simple reason that they have not the experience. The pulses throb in my temples. I know that I am playing cat and mouse with fate, but this Stalin tank has got to be set alight. Up to 2,400 feet once more, and on to the 60-ton Leviathan. It still refuses to burn. Rage seizes me, it must and shall catch fire. The red light indicator on my cannon winks. Not that as well. On one side the breech has jammed, the other cannon has therefore only one round left. I climb again. Is it not madness to risk everything again for the sake of a single shot? Don't argue, how often have you put pay to a tank with a single shot? Many times. It takes a long time to gain 2,400 feet with the Ju-87, far too long. For now I begin to weigh the pros and cons. My one ego says, if the 13th tank has not yet caught fire, you needn't imagine you can do the trick with one more shot. Fly home and remunition, you will find it again all right. To this, my other ego heatedly replies, perhaps it requires just this one shot to stop the tank from rolling on through Germany. Rolling on through Germany sounds much too melodramatic. A lot more Russian tanks are going to roll on through Germany if you bungle it now, and you will bungle it, you may depend upon that. It is madness to go down again to that level for the sake of a single shot. Sheer lunacy. You will say next that I shall bungle it because it is the 13th. Superstitious nonsense. You have one round left, so stop shilly-shallying and get cracking. And already I zoom down from 2,400 feet. Keep your mind on your flying, twist and turn. Again, a score of guns spit fire at me. Now I straighten up, fire. The tank bursts into a blaze. With jubilation in my heart, I streak away low above the burning tank. I go into a climbing spiral. Suddenly, a crack in the engine, and something tears through my leg like a strip of red-hot steel. Everything goes black before my eyes. I gasp for breath, but I must keep flying. Flying, I must not pass out. Grit your teeth, you have to master your weakness. A spasm of pain shoots through my whole body. Ernst, my right leg is gone. No, your leg won't be gone. If it were, you wouldn't be able to speak, but the left wing is on fire. We've been hit twice by 40mm flak. An appalling darkness veils my eyes. I can no longer make out anything. Tell me where I can crash land, then get me out quickly so that I am not burned alive. I cannot see a thing anymore. I pilot by instinct. I remember vaguely that I came into each attack from south to north and banked left as I flew out. I must therefore be headed west and in the right direction for home. So I fly on for several minutes. Why the wing is not already gone, I do not know. Actually, I am moving north-northwest almost parallel to the Russian front. Pull up! Shouts Garderman through the intercom, and now I feel that I am slowly dozing off into a kind of fog, a pleasant coma. Pull up! Yells Garderman again. Were those trees or telephone wires? I have lost all sensation in my mind and pull the stick only when Garderman yells at me. If this searing pain in my leg would only stop, and this flying, if I could let myself sink at last into this queer, grey peace and remoteness which invites me. Pull up! Once again I wrench automatically at the stick, but now for an instant Garderman has shouted me awake. In a flash I realize that I must do something here. What's the terrain like? I ask into the microphone. Bad, marshland. But I have to come down, otherwise the dangerous apathy brought on from my wounded body will again steal over me. I kick the rudder bar with my left foot and howl with agony. But surely it was my right leg that was hit, no? Pull to the right, I bring the nose of the aircraft up and slide her gently onto her belly. In this way, perhaps the release gear of the undercarriage will not function and I can make it after all. If not, we shall pancake. The aircraft is on fire, she bumps and skids for a second. Now I can rest. Now I can finally slip away into the great distance. How wonderful. Maddening pains jerk me back into consciousness. Is someone pulling me about? Are we jolting over rough ground? Now it is over. At last I sink utterly into the arms of silence. I wake up. Everything around me is white, intent faces, a pungent smell. I am lying on an operating table. A sudden violent panic convulses me. Where is my leg? Is it gone? The surgeon nods. Spinning downhill on brand new skis, diving, athletics, pole jumping. What do these things matter? How many comrades have been far more seriously wounded? Do you remember? That one in the hospital at Dnipropetrovsk whose whole face and both hands had been torn off by a mine? The loss of a leg, an arm, a head are all of no importance if only the sacrifice could save the fatherland from its mortal peril. This is no catastrophe. The only catastrophe is that I cannot fly for weeks and, in the present crisis, at that. These thoughts flashed to my brain in a second, and now the surgeon says to me gently, I couldn't do anything else, except for a few scraps of flesh and some fibrous tissue. There was nothing there, so I had to amputate. If there was nothing there, I think to myself with a wry humor, how could he amputate? Well, of course, it is all in a day's work for him. But why is your other leg in plaster? He asks. It has been since last November. Where am I? At the Waffen-SS main dressing station at Zelo. Oh, at Zelo. That is less than 5 miles behind the front, so I evidently flew north-northwest, northwest. Waffen-SS soldiers brought you in and one of our medical officers performed the operation. You have another wounded man on your conscience, he adds with a smile. Did I by any chance bite the surgeon? You didn't go as far as that, he says, shaking his head. No, you didn't bite him, but a pilot officer Choral tried to land with a Fieseler Storch on the spot where you crashed. But it must have been difficult, for he pancaked, and now he too has his head swathed in bandages. Good old Choral. It seems as if, when I was flying subconsciously, I had more than one guardian angel. Meanwhile, the Reichsmarschall has sent his personal doctor with instructions to bring me back at once to the bomb-proof hospital in the Zoo bunker. But the surgeon who operated will not hear of it because I have lost too much blood. It'll be all right tomorrow. The Reichsmarschall's doctor tells me that Göring immediately reported the incident to the Führer. Hitler, he says, was very glad that I had got off so lightly. Of course, if the chickens want to be wiser than the hen, this is what happens, he is reported to have said, among other things. I am relieved that no mention has been made of his veto of my flying. I also believe that in view of the desperate struggle in which the whole situation has been involved in the last few weeks, my continuance in action is accepted as a matter of course. The next day I am moved into the Zoo bunker, sited below the heaviest AA guns aiding in the defense of the capital against the Allied attacks on the civil population. On the second day there is a telephone on my bedside table. I must be able to communicate with my wing about operations, the situations, etc. I know that I shall not be on my back for long, and I do not want to lose my command, and therefore I am anxious to be kept informed of everything in detail and participate in my unit's every activity, even if I can only be kept informed and participate by telephone. The doctors and the nurses whose care of me is touching are, in this respect at least, not over-pleased with their new patient. They keep on saying something about rest. Almost every day I am visited by colleagues from the unit or by other friends, some of them people who call themselves my friends in order to force a way into my sick room. When those who crash my sick room are pretty girls, they open their eyes wide and raise their eyebrows interrogatively when they see my wife sitting at my bedside. I have already had a professional discussion about an artificial limb, if only I had made that much recovery. I am impatient and fidgeting to get up. A little later I wangle a visit from a maker of artificial limbs. I ask him to make me a provisional artificial leg with which I can fly even if the stump is not yet healed. Several first-class firms refuse on the grounds that it is too soon. One accepts the order if only as an experiment. In any case, he sets about it so energetically that he almost makes me dizzy. He sets the whole of my thigh up to the groin in plaster without first greasing it or fitting a protective cap. After letting it dry, he remarks laconically, "Now think of something nice." At the same moment he wrenches with all his strength at the hard plaster, in which the hairs of my body are embedded, and tears it off. I think the world is falling in. The fellow has missed his vocation. He would have made an excellent blacksmith. My third squadron and the wing staff have meanwhile moved to Görlitz, where I went to school. My parents' home is just nearby. The Russians are at this moment fighting their way into the village. Soviet tanks are driving across the playground from my youth. I could go mad to think of it. My family, like many millions, must long since have become refugees, able to save nothing but their bare lives. I lie condemned to inactivity. What have I done to deserve this? I must not think of it. Flowers and presents of every kind are proof of the people's affection for their soldiers. Every day they are delivered to my room. Besides the Reichsmarschall, Minister Goebbels, whom I did not before know, visits me twice. A conversation with him is very interesting. He asks my opinion of the purely strategic situation in the east. The Oder front, I tell him, is our last chance of holding the Soviets. Beyond that, I see none, for with it the capital falls too. But he compares Berlin with Leningrad. He points out that it did not fall because all the citizens made every house a fortress. And what Leningrad could do, the population of Berlin could surely help him do as well. His idea is to achieve the highest degree of organization for a house-to-house defense by installing wireless sets in every building. He is convinced that his Berliners would prefer death to falling victims to the Red Hordes. How seriously he meant this, his end was afterwards to prove. From a military point of view, I see it differently, I reply. Once the battle for Berlin is joined after the Oder front is broken, I think it is absolutely impossible that Berlin can be held. I would remind you that the comparison between the two cities is not admissible. Leningrad has the advantage of being protected on the west by the Gulf of Finland and on the east by Lake Ladoga. There was only a weak and narrow Finnish front to the north of it. The only real chance of capturing it was from the south, but on that side Leningrad was strongly fortified and could make use of an excellent system of prepared positions. Also, it was never entirely cut off from its supply line. Lighters could cross Lake Ladoga in the summer, and in winter they laid railway lines over the ice and so were able to feed the city from the north. My arguments failed to convince him, however. In a fortnight I am up for a short while for the first time and am able to enjoy a little fresh air. During the Allied air attacks I am up on the platform with the AA guns and see from below what is probably very unpleasant up above. I am never bored. Fridolin brings me papers which require my signature or other additional problems, sometimes accompanied by one or other of my colleagues. Field Marshal Greim, Skorzeny or Hanna Reitsch look in for an hour's chat. Something is always doing. Only my inner restlessness at being out of it torments me. When I came into the Zoo bunker, I solemnly declared that I would walk again in 6 weeks' time and fly. The doctors know that their veto is anyhow useless and would only anger me. At the beginning of March, I go out for a walk in the fresh air for the first time, on crutches. During my convalescence, I am invited by one of my nurses to her home, and so I am the guest of the Minister for Foreign Affairs. A real soldier is seldom likely to make a good diplomat, and this meeting with von Ribbentrop is rather intriguing. It is an opportunity for conversations which shed light on the other side of the war, which is being conducted without weapons. He is greatly interested in my opinion of the strength of the Eastern Front and our military potential at this particular moment. I make it clear to him that we at the front hope he is doing something through diplomatic channels to loosen the stranglehold in which we are caught on every side. Cannot the Western powers be made to see that Bolshevism is their greatest enemy and that after an eventual victory over Germany it will be the same menace to them as to us, and that alone they will no longer be able to get rid of it? He takes my remarks as a gentle personal reproof. No doubt I am only playing over a record he has had to listen to many times. He at once explained to me that he has already made a number of attempts which have failed because every time the necessity for a fresh military retirement on one or other sector of the front shortly after he had opened negotiations had encouraged the enemy to continue the war in any case and to leave the conference table. He cites instances and says somewhat reproachfully that the treaties which he had brought off before the war, among other things those with England and Russia, were surely no mean achievement, if not a triumph. But nobody mentions them any longer. Today people see only the negative aspects, the responsibility for which is not his. Naturally, even now negotiations were still going on, but whether with the general situation such as it was, the success he wished for would still be possible was problematic. This peep behind the scenes of diplomacy sates my curiosity, and I am not anxious to learn more. In the middle of March, I take my first walk in the spring sunshine with a nurse in the zoo, and on my very first excursion, I have a slight accident. We, like so many, are fascinated by the monkey cage. I am attracted by a particularly big ape sitting quite unconcernedly and lazily on a tree branch with his long tail hanging down. Of course, I cannot resist doing just what one should not do, and I push both my crutches through the bars with the intention of tickling his tail. I have hardly touched it when he suddenly grabs hold of my crutches and tries with all his monkey strength to pull me into the cage. I stumble on my one leg as far as the bars. Of course the beast will not get me through them. Sister Edelgard hangs on to me, and we both pull on our end of the crutches in a tug of war with the monkey. Man versus ape. His paws have begun to slip a little along his end and meet the rubber caps at the bottom, which are supposed to prevent the crutches from sinking into the ground or skidding when one is walking. The rubber caps excite his curiosity. He sniffs at them, tears them off, and swallows them with a broad grin. At the same moment, I am able to pull the bare sticks out of the cage, and so have at least wrested part of his victory from the ape. A few seconds later, the wailing of sirens gives warning of an air raid. The exertion of walking over the sandy paths of the zoo makes me sweat because the crutches sink deep into the ground and meet with hardly any resistance. Everyone round about me is hurrying and scurrying, and so I can hardly use them to support me and hobble on clumsily. It is slow work. We just reach the bunker in time as the first bombs come down. Gradually, Easter approaches. I want to be back with my colleagues on Easter Sunday. My wing is now stationed in the Großenhain area in Saxony. My first squadron has again moved from Hungary into the Vienna area and still remains on the southeastern front. Gardermann is in Braunschweig for as long as I am away, so that during this time he can exercise his profession as a doctor. I ring him up to tell him that I have ordered a Ju-87 to fetch me at Tempelhof at the end of the week and intend to fly to the unit. As shortly before he has spoken to the professor in charge of my case, he does not really believe it. Besides, he is feeling ill himself. I shall not see him again in this war, for the last operations now to come. His place as my gunner is taken by Flight Lieutenant Niermann, who has no lack of operational experience and wears the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross. After first obeying the order to report to the Führer before I leave, I say goodbye to the bunker. He reiterates his pleasure that everything has gone relatively smoothly. He makes no allusion to my flying, for presumably the idea of my doing so does not enter his head. I am sitting in my aircraft again for the first time in 6 weeks. My course is set for my comrades. It is Easter Eve and I am happy. Shortly before I take off, Fridolin rings up and tells me to fly straight to the Sudetenland. He is just on the point of moving the unit to Kummer am See near Nimes. In the aircraft at first I feel very strange, but I am soon back in my element. Steering is complicated by the fact that I can only use one foot on the rudder bar. I can exert no pressure on the right because I have not yet got an artificial limb and have to use my left foot to lift the left rudder bar, thus depressing the right one, which gives the desired result. My stump is wadded into a plaster sheath and projects under the instrument panel without knocking against anything. So, an hour and a half later, I land on my new airfield at Kummer. The wing flying personnel have arrived here an hour before, and our airfield lies amid magnificent scenery between two spurs of the Sudeten Mountains, surrounded by forests with good-sized lakes nearby, and at Kummer itself a lovely forest-girt tarn. Pending the solution of the billeting problem, we foregather of an evening in the room of an inn. Here in the Sudetenland, everything still gives an impression of utter peace and tranquility. The enemy is behind the mountains, and his front is defended by Field Marshal. The enemy is behind the mountains, and this front is defended by Field Marshal Schörner. Consequently, this unruffled calm is not unreasonable. Towards 11 o'clock, we hear the treble voices of a children's choir singing Gott grüße dich. The local school with its mistress is treating us to a serenade of welcome. This is something new to us hard-boiled soldiers. It touches us in a place which now, in this phase of the war, we would as soon forget. We listen meditatively, each of us sunk in his own thoughts. We feel that these children have faith in our power to ward off the impending danger with all its accompanying horrors. Here on the threshold of their homes, we shall not fail them for lack of determination. At the end of their song, I thank them for their charming welcome and invite them to visit our airfield in the morning to have a peep at our birds. They are keen as mustard. They turn up next day and I start the proceedings by taking up my anti-aircraft and firing at 3-foot square target. They turn up next day and I start the proceedings by taking up my anti-tank aircraft and firing at a 3-foot square target. The children stand round in a semicircle and can now imagine an attack on an enemy tank. It is a good tryout for me to manage with one leg. On the other side of the Sudeten mountains it is still foggy, and as we cannot go out on a sortie, I have a little time to waste, so I take up an FW-190 D9 and give an exhibition of low and high flying acrobatics. That genius, Flight Lieutenant Klatschner, my engineer officer, has already readjusted the foot brakes, which are indispensable for this fast aircraft, so that they can be operated by hand. As I come down to land, all the men are gesticulating violently and pointing up into the sky. I look up, and through the gaps in the ragged cloud cover, I can see American fighters and fighter bombers, Mustangs and Thunderbolts, circling above. They are flying at 4,800 to 5,400 feet above a layer of mist. They have not yet caught sight of me alone up there, otherwise I should have observed them while in the air. The Thunderbolts carry bombs and seem to be searching for a target, so our airfield is presumably their objective. Quickly, as far as one can use the word of a one-legged man in plaster, I hop over to where the others are standing by. They must all be got under cover. I hustle the children into the cellar where they will at least be safe from splinters, but no more, for the house which we use as our operations room, being the only one on the airfield, is pretty certain to tempt one of those chaps up there. I enter last to pacify the children just as the first bombs drop, one of them close to the building. The blast smashes the window panes and sweeps away the roof. Our aircraft defense is too feeble to drive the bombers off, but enough to prevent low-level attack. Fortunately, we have no casualties among the children. I am sorry that their innocent romantic ideas of aviation should have thus been brutally converted into grim reality. They soon quiet down again, and the schoolteacher marshals her little flock into a crocodile and shepherds them towards the village. Flight Lieutenant Niermann is radiant. He hopes he has got a film of the whole attack. Throughout the performance he has been standing in a foxhole, filming the falling bombs from the moment of their release to their impact with the ground and the fountains of earth they spout into the air. This is a tidbit for the expert photographer from Spitzbergen, where he has also succeeded in taking some unique pictures. Fresh meteorological reports from the Görlitz-Bautzen area forecast a gradually clearing up of the weather, so we take off. The Soviets have bypassed Görlitz and pushed on beyond Bautzen, which is encircled with its German garrison, in the hope of reaching Dresden by way of Bischofswerda. Continual counterattacks are launched against these spearheads, trying to effect the collapse of Field Marshal Schörner's front, and with our support Bautzen is relieved and we destroy a large number of vehicles and tanks. This flying takes a lot out of me. I must have lost much blood, and my apparently inexhaustible stamina has its limitations after all. Our successes are shared by battle and fighter formations placed under my command and stationed on an airfield in the vicinity. In the first fortnight of April, a wireless signal summons me to the Reichskanzlei. The Führer tells me that I am to take over the command of all jet units and with them clear the airspace above General Wenk's new army now being assembled in the region of Hamburg. This army's first objective will be to strike from the neighborhood of this city into the Harz in order to cut the supply lines of the Allied armies already established further east. The success of the operation at this critical juncture depends on the preliminary clearance of the airspace above our own lines, otherwise it is doomed to failure. The Führer is convinced of this, and General Wenck, who is to conduct the operation, agrees with him. I beg the Führer to relieve me of this assignment because I feel that I am at the moment indispensable in Field Marshal Schörner's sector, his army being engaged in a most arduous defensive battle. I recommend him to choose for the task someone from Jet Command who will not be so out of his depth as I should. I point out to him that my experience is limited to dive bombing and tank combat, and that I have always made a point of never giving an order which I could not assist in carrying out myself. With jet aircraft I could not do this and should therefore feel ill at ease with the formation leaders and crews. I must always be able to show my subordinates the way. You have not got to fly at all, you have only to organize. If anyone questions your bravery because you are on the ground, I will have them hanged. A trifle drastic, I reflect, but probably he only wished to dispel my scruples. There are plenty of people with experience, that alone is not enough. I must have somebody who can organize and carry out the operation energetically. A final decision is not reached that day. I fly back, only to be recalled a few days later to the Reichsmarschall, who passes on to me the order to undertake this task. Meanwhile, the situation at the front has so far deteriorated that Germany threatens to be divided into two pockets, and the conduct of the operation would hardly be possible. For this reason, and those already mentioned, I refuse. As the Reichsmarschall lets me guess, this is no surprise to him, as since my flat refusal to accept the combat bomber command, he knows my attitude exactly. This time, however, the principal motive of my refusal is that I cannot accept the responsibility for something which I am no longer convinced in my own mind is feasible. I very soon perceive how gravely the Reichsmarschall views the situation. As we are discussing the position at the front, bending over a table spread with maps, he mutters to himself, "I wonder when we shall have set fire to this shack." He means Karinhall itself. He advises me to go to the Führer's headquarters and personally inform him of my refusal. As, however, I have received no orders to this effect, I fly back immediately to my wing, where I am urgently awaited. But this is not to be my last flight to Berlin. And there it is. Rudel is hit again, but this time severely, and loses his right leg below the knee. What would have been a crippling blow to most men, no pun intended, is just another speed bump for him, apparently. At least his humours and inclination for shenanigans haven't suffered, apparent by his teasing of the monkey in the zoo, which promptly retaliates. Now, I've been to the African bush a couple of times, and monkeys are no joke, I can tell you. He was lucky to be on the other side of this fence. And so his spirit remained unbroken, and he is itching to get back into the air as soon as possible. Every new mission or task proposed to him, even by the Führer himself, he declines. His heart belongs to the skies, and losing a leg will not stop him. After all, that's why he's got two of them. We will see how he manages in the next episode. Cheers.